have your attention? If we can have your attention, we'll get started. We were going to start with Dr. Hecox and Dr. Pettit, and the basis of the meeting, or the reason for the meeting, was to give an update on the additional information on the vertical seismic profile as it relates to the Oxy Cavern number 1. But since we're having a technical difficulty, we should have that computer up and running very shortly. But we can start. We'll have Mr. Bruce Martin with Texas Brine, who's going to make some comments and answer some questions. And then when we're finished with this matter, we'll go hopefully have everything up for Dr. Hecox and Dr. Pettit at that time.
Thanks, Marty. Good evening. I think all of you know me, but in case someone doesn't, I'm Bruce Martin, Vice President of Operations with Texas Brine. Yesterday I gave a presentation to the Joint Legislative Committee, and I know that we've got other information we want to cover tonight. So what we have in the back is copies of the presentation given, and it has a lot of the same format, but updated numbers that we gave, or I gave back in late January. So it's there for you to look at. There's copies for you all if you want some. I thought I'd walk through just a few of the key highlights and then have a couple more comments to cover. With respect to sinkhole containment, one of the three key areas that we're working on, we did get preliminary containment or initial containment of the sinkhole on February 26th, where we built the new north and south and upgraded the western berms. We are in the final stages of design of the sinkhole containment, and then we hope to be finished with that final system in the May time frame, where we'll be adding geotechnical fabric, clay, limestone, and building the sinkhole to the final level, final elevation, along with inflow and outflow control structures to finish up that whole system. So that process is continued, but we felt like it was imperative to get the initial containment system complete, which did happen last month. With respect to air, water, and seismic monitoring, we continue to see no elevated levels of VOCs, hydrogen sulfide, LEL, carbon monoxide. All of those have been no elevated levels, and we've not seen any positive hits of LEL or H2S by any of the monitors in the Bayou Corne area or any of the sampling that we've done. In addition, we continue to take surface water and groundwater samples, and we've seen no water contaminants detected outside the sinkhole. And the overall seismic monitoring process, the 6 seismic surface stations and the 450-foot geophone well, continue to be active, and our reporting continues to the Seri helicoder site that I think all of you have access, and I know the website's on the web address is on our website. From a gas venting standpoint, in the past 2 months we've spent a lot of effort putting in additional relief wells. We currently have 30 relief wells installed. As of the last count, 25 were flaring. We have 3 more planned or underway. We're in a quiet period right now with the 3D seismic survey because data acquisition has begun. So there won't be any more installed until after that process is complete. That's probably going to take about 2 weeks. And that kind of takes me into the next topic, and that's the active seismic program. We did complete the VSP results in January. Dr. Hecox is going to talk about some of the conclusions there. The good news is the edge of the salt, there was initial concern about the edge of the salt west of number 3 cavern. Everything says that's exactly where it was back in the 2010 VSP and the 2007 Legend 3D. So the western edge of the dome remains stable. It hasn't moved. There hasn't been any changes. The Oxy Geismar 1 cavern, as already been mentioned, does appear to be the edge of the salt, does appear to be closer to that cavern than we previously understood. It does not pose any imminent threat. It is still under pressure. It is still stable. And it has integrity as it has for the last 1.5 years since it was taken out of service. And then, as I've already mentioned, the 3D seismic survey is underway. The target is to produce images of the western flank of the salt dome along with any hydrocarbon reservoir zones down to a depth of 7,000 feet, as well as the extent of any gas in the shallow aquifer up at the surface or in the MRA, the Mississippi River Alluvial Aquifer. And that typically runs from about 120 feet deep to around 300 to 500 feet deep. So that's a lot of the efforts, and it's just a quick summary of the activities that have been going on in the past couple of months since our last update. And again, we have handouts in the back for anybody that wishes them. I want to spend a few minutes to talk about the topic of norm. That's recently come up again, and I want to tell you just straight up where we stand with norm and where that whole topic is. Just to make sure we're all clear, norm stands for naturally occurring radioactive material. Typically, this in a brine well operation, this comes from the scale that's on brine well tubing or casing in the well. It tends to concentrate in that scale. As a result of maintenance activity on several of the brine wells, that scale is actually, over the years, has fallen off and was actually around the wellhead on Mtg1.3, as well as another location of ours. But let me tell you, that material was never pumped, placed, or put inside any of the caverns at Grand Bayou or Chocahula or any of the caverns that we operate. We did seek approval from DNR and DEQ to do so when we first discovered it. But after looking at it and getting our permits, because it was an entity that because when we discovered it was the first time we found it, we said, okay, we need to talk to DEQ and DNR and figure out how to best manage this. We asked for permission to put it in a well, but after we sought that permission, we realized that's not what we need to do. The regulations that came out allowed us to monitor it in place, which we did. That material is still probably sitting around the wellhead on number 3 well. Since then, the regulations have said that that material no longer needs to be monitored because it's of such low levels. There's been a lot of hearsay about that norm being put in number 3 cavern. I'm telling you, it wasn't. And that is even confirmed, since April 3rd. EPA and state agencies have checked for radioactive levels and have not seen anything above normal background. The EPA's aspect flyover plane did not detect any radiation, which is exactly what we would expect. Recently, there was discussion about the topic of technically enhanced norm. And I got to be honest with you, prior to yesterday, I'd never heard that term. We have permission from DNR and DEQ to place brine solids. These is basically calcium carbonate and magnesium hydroxide. That is the result of treating this hardness that comes out of the brine. And it's this hardness that we're actually allowed and got permission from the state agencies to put down wells if we choose to. Similar to what a water softener does. It removes the calcium and magnesium in the brine. But for purposes of Oxy, Geismar, Grand Bayou, we have never put any of these brine solids down those wells. So just wanted to be straight up with you. We've never put norm in the wells, and we've never put brine solids in the Oxy, Geismar, Grand Bayou wells, either number 1, 2, or 3. With that, I'm going to introduce a colleague of mine, Brad Myers with Keene Miller. He's going to come up here and talk about settlements. I know it's a topic that all of you are very interested in. So he's going to come up and kind of explain the scenario and the situation and try to shed some light on what our plans are with respect to that. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Brad Myers. As Bruce said, I'm with the Keene Miller Law Firm in Baton Rouge. And I'm going to very briefly describe for you what the program we have put together for the claims resolution process for those who are not represented by a lawyer, who are not a plaintiff, are not identified as a plaintiff in a pending lawsuit, and who have contacted us and don't want a lawyer to attempt to resolve their claim. I'm going to be somewhat limited in what I can talk to you about simply because there are pending federal and state lawsuits. We are under constraints from the federal judge as well as federal law as to what we can say to people who are members of the class. And all of you, if you live within the evacuation area, are identified as a putative class member, meaning that if at some point in time the judge certifies a class, it will likely include those people who were evacuated. So because of that, I need to be very careful what I tell you and what I can talk to you about and what kinds of questions I can answer. I will tell you this, that the lawyers who are involved in the class action are very experienced lawyers. If you are represented by a lawyer, I suggest that you talk with that lawyer about your individual situation, and we're happy to discuss a possible resolution of your claim with your lawyer. Nothing I say tonight, you should not take anything I say tonight as any suggestion that you not have a lawyer, or that if you have a lawyer that you dismiss your lawyer. I know those in the federal court, and there are some of you out there who have lawyers who have contacted us to talk about resolution of your claims, even though you're not involved in a lawsuit. I know all of them, they're all very competent lawyers, and we're happy to work with them to try to resolve your claim. But there have been a number of people who have contacted the company through the command center who have indicated to us that they want to try to resolve their claims without having a lawyer involved. And that is the process that I just simply want to tell you about tonight. Beginning on Monday of this week, the people from the Worldly Claims Service began contacting those of you who are not represented by lawyers who contacted us and asked us to discuss with you the possible resolution of your claim in order to set up a meeting, first a meeting so that you can fill out the necessary forms that we need before we can proceed with the process, and secondly, to set up an appointment with you so that the appraiser and the adjusting company that we have retained to help us evaluate your individual claims can go out and inspect your property. So there will be two occasions that you will have to meet with representatives of the company. The first is to fill out certain forms. We need a form that you acknowledge that you are not represented by a lawyer, just to protect us so that we don't violate any rules that the judge has set in the federal court litigation in New Orleans. And it also is an acknowledgement that you recognize that if you want a lawyer, you can have one at any point in the process. If you want a lawyer, you can get a lawyer and have that lawyer contact us, and we will continue the discussions through your lawyer. The second form that we need you to fill out will be a claims information sheet. It is important. It's got a number of items in there, one of which relates to whether or not you believe that your property sustained actual physical damage, for example, a cracked slab, cracked windows, cracked sheetrock, that sort of thing. That's important for our purposes for the evaluation of your claim. One of the other things that we ask in this claim form or the claim information sheet is we ask you whether you have an idea of what you believe your claim is worth, and to please share that with us so that we can take that into account in your evaluation. For example, if you believe your claim is worth X number of dollars and we agree with that, we may want to go ahead and proceed to the resolution of that claim immediately without even inspecting your property if that's what you want to do. The second meeting that you will have to attend is a meeting that you arrange with the Worldly Claims Service people so that they can go out and inspect your house. They're going to go out and take measurements and the appraiser, because the ultimate goal for us is to attempt to put a fair market value on your property at a time prior to the development of the sinkhole and the evacuation order. And that is the initial basis for our evaluation of each claim, the fair market value at that time, sometime between May and August of 2012. I know that there was discussion about whether it's August 2nd or May 30th before bubbles appeared. We heard that suggestion. We've talked with our appraiser and we're evaluating whether it makes any difference one way or the other. There is some suggestion that because of the economy and the increase that the real estate market since 2008 has slowly but surely gained in value over time, it may be more beneficial to you to have a fair market value in August as opposed to May because of the possible increase in real estate values during that 4-month period. But that's just something that we'll have to evaluate based upon the appraisers looking at comparable sales and that sort of thing. So they'll take measurements. They will they will go walk around with you to inspect the property. They will document any damage that you believe is related to the development of the sinkhole, and they'll photograph that and as I mentioned, document all those damages that you claim. Once that is done, our plan is to, within 30 days of the inspection, so if the first inspection is March 25th, I think is Monday, within 30 days of that, our plan is to have a proposal to the individual homeowner or resident with what we believe to be a fair and reasonable offer based upon an individual evaluation of your claim. And there is, in addition, going back to the form, in addition to property damage, there is a section for you to assert any other types of claims that you believe you have, for example, loss of income from a business that's located in the evacuation area, that sort of thing. So there'll be a location on the form for you to assert any claim that you want us to consider in this resolution process. Once we have made our initial offer to you, then you have a period of time to respond to that. We're hoping that you can respond in 30 days, but there's really nothing set in stone. It's not. We won't expect you to respond in 24 hours. We won't expect you to respond in 48 hours. We expect you and hope that you will take our offer. We believe that they will be fair and reasonable. You may not agree with them, but we want you to take your time and make an educated, well-informed decision on whether to accept the offer, whether to reject it and continue the negotiations or the discussions any further, or whether to make a counter-proposal to us. If you have a particular valuation in mind that you think your claim is worth and we're only a few dollars off, or within the range of what you think is a possibility, we certainly want to hear your counter-offer. And if once, assuming that we agree on the valuation of your claim and the resolution of your claim, then we will go ahead and document that claim and get you your money. If we can't agree during our discussions on the valuation of your claim, then the next step in the process is for you, if you want to do this, and this is solely within your discretion, if you want to have a third party conduct an informal, non-binding mediation where basically we have an independent third party that we will agree on. There are a number of mediation firms in the Baton Rouge and surrounding areas, New Orleans, where we can agree on a person who is independent, both of you and of the company, to sit down and conduct a negotiation kind of as a middleman so that we can attempt to reach a fair and reasonable resolution of your claim. That's something that you don't have to participate in, but we certainly want to offer that, and we will pay the cost of the mediator. For those of you who are represented by lawyers and who are involved in the federal court litigation, the process that we are going to propose to the liaison counsel appointed by Judge Zaney to conduct the litigation on behalf of the plaintiffs is going to be essentially the same. That process will be a little bit slower because those lawyers may have a different idea of how things ought to work, and we'll have to negotiate that. But they are working diligently towards getting to a point in the federal court litigation where the process will be the same as that with those of you who have decided not to consult a lawyer, at least at this time, and that those will be parallel processes going on a little bit, not necessarily exactly at the same time, but they will certainly, hopefully, follow the same process, and the resolution of claims hopefully will be the same, regardless of whether you're represented by a lawyer or not. So with that, if there are any questions, I will certainly attempt to answer those. Yes?
Okay, you're saying that you have appraisers already in place to go out and appraise our properties?
Yes, sir.
Okay, are these appraisers going to take comps from the general area?
They are going to take comps from wherever they can find comps. And let me just tell you this, I'm not an appraiser. We have retained a company called Right of Way Services, Inc. They have the appraisers that work there work for both private industry and they have worked for the state of Louisiana in certain cases. They are professional appraisers. We're going to follow. We're not going to tell them. In other words, we're not going to tell them how to do their work. Just like we wouldn't tell your doctor how to treat you. We're not going to tell the appraiser how to do their work. But what we understand is they attempt to find appraisals, or they attempt to find comparables in the same area. If they can't do that, and I understand from our own research that in the last year there's only been about 3 sales within the 3 subdivisions that were evacuated. So I think that they're going to have to go outside of the 3 subdivisions, first to Assumption Parish to see if there are any comparables within Assumption Parish and then within the surrounding parishes.
Well, I guess my point is, don't you think they need to go out into a fair radius of, say, 50 or 60 or 70 miles? This is a little different situation than they would normally come up against. This property does not flood. You can go elsewhere and find flooded property and put them on stilts. There's not a problem there. But to find property on the ground that does not flood, they're going to have to go a distance.
I assure you they will go wherever they can to find the most comparable property to what they're looking for. I mean, one of the things that they're facing, just from riding through, is finding a comparable neighborhood, for example, where there are manufactured homes next to homes on slabs and slab on grade homes, next to homes that are worth $200,000 next to homes that are worth $50,000, and I think that's the situation, just based on my observation driving through the neighborhood, that they're going to face. But they will do whatever they can to make sure that the fair market value that they assign to each individual home truly reflects that market value based on all of those factors. Yes, sir.
I heard you talk about they were going to give 2.5 to 3 times the appraised value of the property. Is that true?
That is not true.
What are they going to give?
Well, there is not. We are not going to come up with a formula. I think that 2.5 to 3 times value is urban legend, quite frankly, based upon the Bayou, the Grand Bayou buyouts. I have personally talked with the lawyers who were involved in Grand Bayou, and the valuations that were placed on those homes and the resolution of those claims by the companies involved in those was not based upon a formula of 2 or 3 times the value, the fair market value. It may very well be that after they made their calculations and determined what they were going to offer to resolve those claims, people said, well, that's 2 times my value, but there was no formula in Grand Bayou, and we don't intend to have a formula. What we're going to do is we promised the local officials we are going to evaluate each individual claim separately and come up with what we believe is a fair and reasonable valuation. Let me just give you an example. Where it may benefit our decision not to just say 3 times or 2 times value, may benefit a particular homeowner. If, for example, somebody does have a manufactured home that's worth, say, $25,000 fair market value, and everybody agrees on that. If we had a formula that says 2 times that value, that of course would be $50,000. It may be that we, based upon that individual homeowner's circumstances, we decide to offer more than the fair market value. But if we're locked into a formula, we wouldn't be able to do that. Yes, sir.
My question is, what will happen to these units that are bought out? Are they just going to be abandoned? Are you going to tear it down?
I'll be honest with you, we have not made that decision. There are a number of things that, there are a number of options. It could be that once we determine on how to resolve your claim, we walk away from that. We give you the value of what we agree upon, and you remain in possession of that property. It may be that we take possession of the property and try to sell it, presumably, and we're hoping sooner rather than later, that the evacuation order will be lifted and people will start to be able to move back into their homes. We understand that people don't want to live in a ghost town where you have 4 or 5 abandoned houses on the street that become blighted property, and we're not going to let that happen. We will figure out something, either by letting you keep the property, letting you move the home off of it if you want, or even taking possession and then turning around and trying to sell those homes once the evacuation order is lifted and people are moving back in. I just can't answer that tonight. Yes, sir.
Sir, can y'all, you say some questions you can't answer, can you answer these 3 questions? Can you admit that y'all screwed up? Can you admit that you're sorry? And then you admit that you do everything you can to help us out?
Well, I'm not going to admit that we screwed up, because I'm a lawyer and I don't do that. I will tell you that we are sorry that the situation arose, and we're doing everything within our power to resolve it, not only to try to make sure that the evacuation order is lifted and that you are able to move back in your homes, and that they are safe when you move back in, will continue to be safe. And those of you who don't want to do so, we're going to attempt to resolve all of the claims. For those of you who don't want to move back into your homes, that's the purpose of this process, is to try to resolve it, and we're doing everything we think within our power to do that. Yes, sir.
Now, for those of us who have decided, or we, for the time being anyhow, we decided we want to stay, we certainly feel we're entitled to some type of compensation for the diminished property value. Therefore, should we go ahead and fill out the form, request an appraisal of our properties?
At some point in time, I think, yes. I mean, to resolve, this is what we're trying to do. We think that the response, we think, is getting to the point where we've focused from the beginning, responding to the orders of the state and trying to do everything we can to stabilize the situation and gather the scientific evidence necessary to allow the state and the parish to lift the evacuation order. And we're at a point now where we think we can't do everything at one time. So from a priority standpoint, those people who want to be bought out, that's what we're going to work on first. Resolution of all those other claims will come along. The problem that we have with calculating the diminution of value is that that necessarily involves a pre-sinkhole value and a post-sinkhole value. And right now, now that the fact that you can't move back into your home right now, it almost is pointless to try to put a value on that home now. So once I think it will be a better time to evaluate those claims after the evacuation order is lifted. Unless it drags out too long, then we'll reassess that. But
you do realize, though, quite a few residents have actually never evacuated and are still residing in their homes.
I understand that, yes, sir.
Okay, I have a question on this settlement, which is part of these forms that you want to fill out. You're telling me that for my stress and my inconvenience, I need to put it on that form and give it to you?
Yes, ma'am.
The amount I think I'm entitled to?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Are the settlements going to continue even after the evacuation is lifted? Or is that going to be, okay, safe to go back and tell you?
Well, as long as there's litigation and lawyers representing people, that litigation is going to go on until it's resolved one way or the other. So the answer to that is we will continue to try to resolve all claims that resulted from the development of the sinkhole and the evacuation order, regardless of whether you can move back in or not. I mean, I understand that there will be claims for diminution of value once the evacuation order is lifted and people move back in. That may be that your home is has not lost any value. I mean, we don't know that, and we won't know that until well, right now, I understand that you believe your home is worth zero now, but if you're moved back in 6 months, then it may be a different situation, and we just need to let the appraisers to do that. And I will say, one of the things that will probably happen with those of you who are represented by lawyers, your lawyers will probably retain their own appraisers to do the same, to work with our appraiser to try to come to evaluation. And certainly any of you who don't have a lawyer, who want to have your own appraiser, feel free to do that and provide that information to us. In fact, one of the things on the forms that we ask you to do is to provide us with certain documents if you have them, and one of those is a recent appraisal. If somebody, for example, refinanced their home 6 months before the sinkhole developed and the evacuation order was issued, and you have an appraisal for that, we would like to see it, because that gives us kind of an idea of where, an idea of how to evaluate your claim. Yes, ma'am.
I'm one of the ones that want to stay. And is there at some point a possibility that we can get something in writing from Texas Brine stating what they're going to do with the properties that they do buy out? Because I don't want to have an empty lot next door and Texas Brine owns it. The next thing I know, there's going to be a flare put in on that lot. That makes a big difference in our decision to stay or whatever. But I would want it in writing.
I'll have to think about that one. I think each of you who have a claim, there will be settlement documents that are prepared, and I think that we can probably accommodate pretty much any request like that within the context of a document where you settle your claim under these conditions, and if they change, then you have the right to pursue an additional claim. Yes, sir.
Go along with me on a scenario. Let's say that the evacuation is lifted 18 months after it was imposed. That obviously is beyond the normal 12-month statute of limitation for filing suit. If we can't reach an agreement on diminution of value at that point, in other words, after 18 months, doesn't that just kind of leave us high and dry?
That's like kind of almost like a law school exam. The answer to that is, and I want to give this caveat, as most lawyers will do, and accountants are even worse than lawyers. This is not legal advice. That's the situation. But now, that having been,
when you say claim, you mean suit?
That's right. Yeah, I mean. You would still, in Louisiana, there's a 1-year prescriptive period or statute of limitations which require people to file suit within a year of an accident. An automobile accident happens today, you've got 1 year from today to file a lawsuit. There's a doctrine called continuing torts that would probably apply in that situation, but if that becomes a concern of yours, you should certainly consult a lawyer and get his advice or her advice on that.
I have a clarifying question about Pam's question about the flare in the vacant lot next door. If there is a subdivision property restriction, I presume that, and Texas Brine acquired the property, I presume that Texas Brine would comply with the deed restriction.
My understanding is anybody who obtains or purchases property and becomes a homeowner in a subdivision that has property, legal property restrictions, obviously there are some that are prohibited by law, but if it is a legal property or property restriction, Texas Brine or anybody else owns the property, they're obligated to follow those restrictions.
More particularly, if you're in a subdivision that requires a house of a particular size and type, then presumably you can't put up a flare.
That's one of those questions that it's so specific that I'm going to have to defer until it actually. Let's talk about that when it actually happens. I mean, one of the problems, and I'm happy to stand up here as long as you want to answer hypothetical questions, but there are so many different facts and circumstances that can arise that it's almost impossible to answer those in the abstract. I mean, I can give you general concepts, but it's very difficult to answer specific questions without actually facing an actual factual situation. Yes, ma'am.
So what happens after they do the 3D imaging and they determine that it's too dangerous for anyone to live there? That's supposed to be in the next month. So what's going to happen to everybody then?
I don't know if we can answer that. I can't predict. All I can do is give you my speculation as to what would happen. I'm not sure anybody can answer that question now. I think we need to wait until the 3D comes in, and I think we're hoping, obviously, that that's not the case. But if that is the case, then the state and the parish, through President Trish, will certainly take the appropriate action to protect everyone's interests.
I have one other question. Okay, some of these homes are actually empty, and some of the people are not going back to their homes, keep their grass cut, and what have you, or maintain the lawn, so to speak. And you're going to have snakes, rodents, and what have you. Is there anywhere in there that maybe we could get this ordered that somebody goes in and keeps it down for the ones that are staying back there?
Well, my understanding is nobody's supposed to be staying back there, but I appreciate that there are those that are, and I think that's something that the parish needs to address. Again, that's if that's happening now,
It's happening now.
then listen, we will talk about it. I think maybe talk with Mr. Boudreau or somebody and see if there's something that can be done about that. And I'm sure they'll ask for our input into that kind of situation. Yes, sir.
So, what I'm, questions they're asking you and your answers, you're implying you better get along, is that correct?
I'm not gonna suggest one way or the other whether you should or you shouldn't.
That's a simple question.
Well, I think that's an individual answer. I don't want to let me just put it this way. I don't want to discourage you from getting a lawyer. I have plenty of lawyers who represent plaintiffs, and they're friends of mine, and they're good lawyers. But if the question really is, from our perspective, is if you don't want a lawyer and you've made that decision, then we're able to talk to you. If you're unsure, then I suggest you think about it, maybe consult with some friends who have lawyers and some who don't have lawyers, or wait until we finish this first round of appraisals and see what people think about our ability to resolve those claims. But I'm not going to suggest one way or the other whether you should get a lawyer. I'm just not going to do it. I'm not going to answer that question. That's an unfair question to me because it's speculation. I don't know what I would do. I really don't. I'm not in your situation. I can understand and empathize with your situation, but I'm not in your situation, and the way I would react if I was in fact in your situation may be the same or different than yours. So I think whatever I would do would be irrelevant to your decision.
Right, but you were aware that the selling of properties in that area is very infrequent because people stay there because they like it there.
That's right, and that is certainly a factor that will have to be taken into account. Any offer that's made to resolve your claim, we'll certainly have to take that into account. And I suspect that you won't let us resolve your claim without taking that into account.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
also,
Go ahead.
also you was comparing a $200,000 home to a $50,000 trailer. And so that means that the $200,000 home is going to be less value, right?
Based upon it is what it is. I mean, the fair market value of the home is what it is based upon the comparables. And I don't want to speculate on whether it's be more or less valuable. It's more or less valuable. It was more or less valuable before the sinkhole, based upon a $200,000 home being next to a $50,000 home. That's just a fact of life. The point I'm trying to make is that we're going to evaluate each person's situation individually, and we're going to try to make what we think is a fair and reasonable offer based on your individual circumstances. And I don't think that we can just lump everybody together. Yes, sir.
I think you mentioned earlier that if we stand on our own negotiating with Texas Brine without an attorney, anytime during those negotiations, before signing is done on the agreement, we can shut the negotiations down and get an attorney.
Yes, sir. That's absolutely true.
Mr. Meyer, will they be handling camp owners that want to relocate as well, sell their camps and do that? I know that was a question from some.
We will take those, yeah, I mean, they should, if they want us to consider their claim, they're welcome to come into the office, to the claims office and fill out a form just like people who live there. It's a question of evaluation, really. Yes, sir.
One other thing
Okay.
I want to make, speaking with Governor General this afternoon, I brought this statement up and he definitely agreed with it. There is a stigma that has settled on the Bayou Corne. At this point in time, as you said, the property has nobody. That stigma is going to maintain itself for a long period of time. And that property, no matter whether it's cleaned up, pristine, that stigma is still going to be there for a long period of time. And the value of the property will not be there. That's my personal opinion. And so the general thing they're doing.
I wasn't there, so I can't, I don't know if you want me to, I'm not going to,
I just wanted Texas Brine to understand that
yeah,
relative to the stigma over that area.
we understand.
Especially when it comes to negotiating for the property.
We understand that you have a claim. We understand that that we need to evaluate those claims, considering the fair market value. And if it comes to the point where we're talking about a diminution of value, whether there's any stigma or not, will be something that the appraiser will take into account, and then you are free to negotiate to.
It's not like you're going to agree that you're not sure if it's a stigma or not. Well, I'll tell you what, just find anyone in this area or in this area of the country and go up to us and say, would you like to buy a land on Bayou Corne? That stigma's there. Guaranteed.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you're talking about if we settle for $1.02, why would we want the land back? Because there's possible environmental concerns on remediation of the soil. And that has to be taken into this too, because if we sell, I don't want it back. I want it over with and it's done.
As I mentioned, we're going to take each individual claimant and evaluate those claims individually. Some people may want their property back. Some people may want to try to move the house. They like the house but don't want to live here. Some people don't want the property. And all those things are things that we will consider in evaluating the individual claims. Let me say this, because I'm sensitive to this, because this is important to the company. If you have evidence of environmental claims that are going to require cleanups, let us know, because every indication is that that's not the case. And we understand that we're flaring off the gas. We believe we have contained the sinkhole, the surface waters. All the samples currently with surface waters don't show any problem with migration from the actual sinkhole property onto anybody else's property. And what I understand is that all of the air monitoring data that has been gathered by DEQ and contractors who have been retained by Texas Brine have indicated no hits above background levels of any chemical that can cause any harm to humans. So if there is evidence of that, certainly we want you to provide that to Mr. Boudreau, and he'll pass that along to us, and we'll evaluate it. But the evidence so far is that that's not the case, and I just don't want that suggestion that we believe that there is any environmental damage that needs cleanup any further than what we're doing already is accurate. Yes, sir.
Okay. I guess just as a point of information, to take back to the client, Texas Brine, and I'm sure they're aware of this, but just in case anybody missed it, last year our property tax assessor reduced our assessment to the tune of 50%. Surely because he felt like our property values had been greatly damaged and diminished. In the last week or two, he announced that next year he's thinking about reducing our property values by to the tune of 90%. So I just want you to be aware of that, take that information back. So there's little doubt that our property values have been greatly damaged in the next.
One last question. John, you want no more questions, maybe? John says no.
Well, no, I received a question, and I want to ask this again. The question was, assuming evacuation order is lifted soon, how long will Texas Brine be engaged into seeing these claims through?
Until they're resolved. Simple. I mean, we will continue to work with people individually or through their lawyers until their claims are resolved.
And the concern is that if the evacuation would get lifted, that you may then stop negotiating. I just want to make sure that that question is answered, so you can continue to see this thing through.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Over here.
One more? Okay.
Sorry, but when has Texas Prime determined when prescription would happen? Would it be August 3rd,
No.
May 30th, or another date?
And even if we did, I'm not going to provide, I mean, that's legal advice that I would give to the company, and I'm just not going to answer that question, but the answer is no. We haven't, I don't think we've made that, haven't looked at it. We've been busy doing other things, and that's certainly something that's not right at the front of our radar right now.
Thank you, Mr. Myers. Are y'all going to be hanging around a little while for claim forms or anything else that they can pick up today from Will?
No, actually, we need, in order for the claim forms.
Well, what's the process for individuals that have not contacted your office and want to contact your office, and who do they contact?
The easiest, you can do it two ways. You can either, in fact, you can contact, I assume everybody has Will Brewer's name and phone number. If not, you simply go by the command trailer. If you're receiving a check, you can do that on, I think it's on Thursday when the checks are distributed. You can do it on Thursday, or we have people there on site every day, every work day, Monday through Friday. Simply go there and they'll have the forms that you need to fill out, and they will be able to arrange for the inspection of your property.
Thank you. Will, raise your hand, everybody. This is Will in the back. Most of you probably know him. He's at the command center daily. Any of you want to pick up a claim form or contact him, get contact or appointment information, contact that gentleman. He's the gentleman in the back with his hand up. At this time, also we're going to have Dr. Hecox and Dr. Pettit come forward to talk about the information that was provided to us, and that's what was brought out last week, that the vertical seismic profiling had identified that there was a potential, the edge of the cavern was potentially closer to the edge of salt than originally predicted. So we called this meeting to give the public the scientific information that we were provided. So they'll have a brief presentation that will open to questions to Dr. Hecox and Dr. Pettit. So hopefully we all have the same understanding regarding the Oxy Gossamer number 1. Dr. Hecox.
Okay, we're going to cover Oxy 1 right at the end. We're going to be brief, but I want to get you updated on the gas flaring and everything else so everybody's up to date. This is a brief presentation. We feel everybody here is pretty well up to speed on the data and stuff, so we're not going to present a lot of data. We're going to present conclusions and updates. We'll stay here until the last question's asked. So if you have questions, we're going to be here. Go, Deborah. The first thing I want to do is update the sinkhole. This is the configuration of the sinkhole. This is the configuration, the middle of February. It's about 1,000 feet across here now, and 600 to 700 feet across here. It was 12 acres when this was done, with settlement over 20 acres Click. The recent slough-in that you heard about was over in this area this weekend, and John estimated another acre went into the sinkhole, so now it's probably on the order of 13 acres in the sinkhole with settlement over a larger area. The gas in the aquifer, we've defined a criteria for remediation, and that is reduced gas pressures so the gas can no longer come to the surface. Very simple. Right now there are 25 wells venting in the aquifer. They're venting between 120 and 150,000 cubic feet per day. You've seen the flares. The wellhead pressures are stable. In the analysis we've conducted, last time I told you the effective radius of influence appeared to be around 500 feet. With the new data we've got, we've had to reduce that to somewhere between 250 to 300 feet. And we've talked about installing additional vent wells below Bayou Corne and Grand Bayou, and I'll talk about that here in just a second. Next. We've talked about this also. We're into a long-term management situation. This is the new updated gas map. This is based on all the PDKs and all the information we've got out of the seismic shot holes and everything else. This is probably the best representation of gas in the aquifer that we've had since this started, because we finally got enough data to be able to start contouring the gas thicknesses in and around the disturbed rock zone is here that we talked about last time. The sinkhole's right under there. It's hard to see, but sinkhole's right there. Hrs.3 is right there. You can see we've got gas over a fairly large area. Right now, the volume in the aquifer that we calculate is about 45 million standard cubic feet of natural gas. What we don't know is how much gas is coming in every day. So this is a dynamic situation, but that's where we're at. That's the latest number that we've calculated. As new data become available, as I promised you, we're going to be updating you through the community meetings. Next. Don Marlin, who's our 3D seismic expert, has identified 8 potential hydrocarbon zones that are feeding into the disturbed rock column and coming up through the disturbed rock into the aquifer. This will be updated when we get the new 3D seismic towards the end of April. His first task, once he gets that data, is going to be to reprocess this and give us a much better idea of how much gas volume potentially is down at depth, between depths of around 600 to 6,000 feet. Next. The vent well area, and this accounts for a smaller radius of influence. The green circles here are essentially the radius of influence around the vent wells Texas Brines put in. They're doing a really good job putting these in. We do have the issue underneath the community. I understand people's reluctance to put flares and vent wells in there. So what DNR has instructed us to do is retain an expert in horizontal drilling technology for environmental problems. We have installed, I personally have installed a number of horizontal wells for remediation purposes. It is a possibility. The problem we've got in the community is being able to control the pressure when you're drilling. If we cause a fracture to get to the surface, normally when that happens you get drilling mud out there and it looks a little bad. We've got gas pressures to deal with. We cannot have fracturing get to the surface with our gas pressures. So that's one of the big things our expert has been asked to do, is take a hard look at this. We've also contracted 2 of the best horizontal drilling companies in the United States. These are people who drill wells for environmental purposes, not deep oil and gas wells. That's a different technology. These are for environmental purposes. And we've contacted them. They work for CB&I, and we're asking them the same question. If we wanted to install horizontal wells, because a number of people asked at the last meeting, can we do it such that we don't have a fracture getting to the surface that would release the gas? Because that would not be a good thing. Next. This is just the overall vent well performance. You can see Texas brine, here's where they started installing a lot of new wells. You can see the increase in cumulative gas flared. We're at about 10.5 million cubic feet flared. You can also see it on the individual daily total. This is when one of the wells by the road produced a lot of gas in a very short period. And we had KB Wellbore estimate what that gas was. It was before they could get a flow meter on it. But you can see that here's the daily flow total, and right now we're running about double what it was last time I was out here and talked to you. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Oxy 3 cavern, but what I want you to see on here, because we're going to talk about Oxy 1 here in a minute. Oxy 3 is here, it's filling up, we've talked about that. The 3-level alert system with the parish, we've talked about. But I want you to see the Oxy 1 cavern is up here. It's much shallower. In fact, the bottom of Oxy 1 is above the top of Oxy 3. Oxy 1, the top of Oxy 1 is at about 2,500 feet, the bottom is at about 3,200 feet. It also is a much, much smaller cavern. It's only about 1/3 the size of Oxy 3. So I want you folks to understand the perspective. Oxy 1 is smaller and shallower than Oxy 3 is. Next. We are monitoring everything around Oxy 3, but also around Oxy 1. The seismic array that Texas Brine has put in is a very, very good seismic array. We can monitor tremors and earthquakes all over the entire area. In fact, the system will actually pick up major earthquakes anywhere in the world. So this is a very good array, and we're monitoring this daily. In addition to Dr. Pettit, who you've met, Dr. Horton Masiri, who was involved from day one through a USGS contract, has now been contracted with DNR to provide ongoing seismic expertise for monitoring these events. And he's fully engaged now. He's actually implementing a new computer system so we can get things. These tell us how many events are occurring per day. So those of you who've looked at the helicorders, they're just a bunch of squiggly lines, and you look at them, you don't quite know what they are. He's processing this, and he's feeding this data, how many events we're getting for the BLP. These are the fluid flow events, and also the micro-earthquake events. So now we're getting systems in place that make it very easy for the parish and OEP to be able to digest the seismic information into what it means. This is up and running now, and we talk to Dr. Horton literally every day. So we've got some really good, in addition to Dr. Pettit, we've got Dr. Horton is on board and fully engaged. And at this point, Dr. Pettit will talk about Oxy 1.
Hello again. I'm actually going to talk a little bit about Oxy 3 and show you some of the first modelling results that we've produced. When I say modelling, what that is it's a technique called geomechanical modelling that uses very sophisticated computer programs to try to understand and simulate how rocks behave. And in this case, the rocks I'm really referring to are the sedimentary layers outside of the salt dome. So this is the Napoleonville salt dome. Here's Oxy 3 cavern, here's Oxy 1. And this is down to about 5,500 feet at the base of Oxy 3. And what we believe happened in this case is that Oxy 3 had a sidewall collapse, and that collapse propagated up to the surface. So when we build these numerical models, they take about 10 days to run on like the latest computer systems. So they're very sophisticated. This is a very large volume. What we do is we put all of this geometry into that computer model and all of the rock properties that we have available to us for both the salt and the sedimentary, and then we watch how the rock just naturally behaves. The computer program is designed to really have all of the kind of physical response that a rock has. And you're able to kind of simulate that behavior through time. So if we go on to the next slide, hopefully this works. We have a movie here, and I'm going to show you the... Here we go. So this is the Napoleonville salt dome that you're looking at. This view is actually southeast. And actually this is the graphic that was on the screen earlier on for quite a while on the before on Gary's title slide. The ground surface is up here, and the cavern is actually buried within the salt dome here. And what happens is, this is kind of repeating through the cycle. What happens is the sidewall of the salt of the cavern collapses in, and in that collapse, what it does is it removes volume from the rock immediately adjacent to the cavern, and that rock breaks up, and then that creates a chain reaction, and that chain reaction creates this what we're calling a disturbed rock zone that propagates all the way up to the surface. And as it reaches the surface, what it does is it then creates a sinkhole. So the sinkhole is really the surface expression of this highly damaged rock volume that reaches the surface. As it goes up, what we believe is happening here, and this is what's key to something that Gary mentioned earlier on, is the 3D seismic. 3D seismic is going to tell us whereabouts the gas reservoirs that this disturbed rock zone has passed through. And those reservoirs are really producing the gas that's coming through to the surface. So once we have the 3D seismic information, we'll be able to combine that with this model and work from there to really understand the gas problem some more. Okay. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the Oxy 1 stability. First of all, Texas Brine performed this VSP earlier on in the year, in January, and they found that Oxy 1 is nearer to the edge of salt than what was previously believed. And the situation that we're in, really, I think, is the analogy that Gary gave a little while ago at the start of the hurricane season. We know there's a danger there, and we know that we need to watch it. So we're putting in all the instrumentation that we need to be able to really accurately look at that behaviour, at what's actually happening around that cavern. So what we've done, the first thing we've done is taken what we know about the cavern and looked to try to predict what the sinkhole would look like if it were to fail. I'm not saying that it will, I'm saying that if it was, what is that sinkhole going to look like? Because we need that to make plans, as the governor was saying today. And the initial sinkhole analysis suggests that if it did happen, the sinkhole diameter is about 460 feet, and the sinkhole depth estimation is about 80 feet. And we're fairly confident with this because we've done the same analysis on the current sinkhole, and we're about right. The Oxy 1 cavern has also being looked at by 4 cavern experts that are contracted to DNR, and there's no indication of instability at present from any of the data. So there's no evidence whatsoever that Oxy 1 cavern is unstable. Most of the seismic events that we're seeing, we now believe are around Oxy 3. So the continuing collapse of that cavern. The best thing to do with Oxy 1 is to maintain pressure in that cavern and to monitor the microseismic activity, to watch it, to observe what's going on. And that's what we're going to be doing. The other thing that's really important is that movie that I showed you, what we believe happened there with that propagation of this disturbed rock zone from 5,500 feet up to the surface. We believe that took many, many months, maybe a year or even longer. So we're going to have, if anything was to happen to Oxy 1, we're going to have many, many months. Now we have the instrumentation in place many months to kind of prepare. We're going to be able to see it happening, and we're going to be able to respond appropriately.
We got you about it before it started?
I'll take questions at the end, if you don't mind.
I'll remember that. I do have an answer for you.
Do you want to answer it? Do you want to answer it now?
I didn't hear the question.
Yeah, the answer was, are we doing anything to stop it from happening in the first place?
He said y'all know months and months ahead about it before anything happened. Did y'all know anything about it before this? I'm talking about Oxy 3.
Not on Oxy 3. No. Oxy 3, we didn't have the instrumentation in place.
I'm talking about Oxy 1.
Yeah, nothing has happened to Oxy 1. Oxy 1, as far as all the evidence that we have, Oxy 1 is completely stable. So just to put that on a map, just to give you some kind of idea of if it happened, if something happened to Oxy 1, and as I say, we would know about it now, then this is really the resulting disturbance on the surface. So this is this disturbed rock zone that we are talking about with Oxy 3, that we've been able to model very effectively, and this is the sinkhole that's there, that's on top of this disturbed rock zone. In the case of Oxy 1, what we believe would happen, the most likely thing that would happen, if it were to, is that the roof would come in. And in that case, the sinkhole would be formed immediately above the Oxy 1 cavern, most likely. So this is really what we think is the most likely scenario, the sinkhole being directly above Oxy 1 and about this dimension. And really it feeds back to what Gary was saying earlier on, that the cavern is much smaller than Oxy 3. So you can see the circles are much smaller. The blue circle is really the worst, what we think right now is the worst case scenario. And that's still about 600 feet away from the highway.
Where is the north and south berm?
Sorry?
The north and south berm, where are they at?
I believe they go around the sinkhole like this.
Okay, what about the north side? Where does your blue circle, does it go past the berm?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. But remember, as I say, this is going to happen over, if it were to happen, it would happen over many months. So we would have a long time to really prepare for that event to happen on the surface, for any disturbance on the surface. Yes, sir.
How would you prepare
We would have to consider that when that started to happen. And there is a contingency plan in place that the Governor's Office has released for looking at the kind of, I don't know if you've read it, it's a green, yellow, red alert level for Oxy 1, specifically for Oxy 1. And right now we are on green and we're doing everything in the green alert level that's required. And yeah, you can go, it was I believe in the newspapers and actually on the Governor website you can find the press release. And as I say, we're watching, so we'll be able to see anything that happens. So, and really I wanted to really emphasize this. This is long-term.
Would you point out the seismic station in relation to Oxy 1 so people understand the seismic array?
Right, the seismic array has been designed specifically to monitor this volume. So they're in effectively a ring around the Texas brine area. So and these numbers that are on this slide refer to the numbers that you'll see on the helicorders if you go to the website that's run by the University of Memphis. So there's station 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and actually 16's hidden behind this legend. Then there's also an array in this well. It's an array of geophones, 3 geophones in the well to get even more sensitivity. And these are positioned down to 450-foot depth in this well. We have another new well that's being instrumented very shortly up here, where another 2 sensors are going to go in. And we're also installing a microseismic system which is going to produce much more sensitive information and with much better location accuracy. We're going to be able to see events with depth with much more accuracy, and that's really key. We're going to be able to see events accurately around the caverns. So, long-term seismic monitoring. We've now got all this instrumentation in place, and we have it there primarily because we're going to be able to observe what's going on. We're going to be able to warn you and stakeholders in this project what's actually happening underground. So we now have this capacity to observe rock disturbance around the caverns and the disturbed rock zone. We can observe any progressive build-up of activity that leads to a sinkhole burp, and we know there is response as and when that happens. Measurements can provide feedback on our simulations and our risk assessment on an ongoing basis, so that we can give a quality control, if you like, to what we're telling you guys. So really, what I kind of really have to say here is we're watching, we're learning, and we're responding to what's happening. Thank you very much.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Cavern number 1, there's no way it can be filled up before anything happens?
Actually, that question's come up. What we've done, we've got 4 cavern experts under contract, and they are engaged now at looking at various options for Oxy 1 in terms of addressing questions like you just asked. Can it be filled up? What's the best way to maintain stability in that cavern? So we've got the experts actually working on it right now. I do not have answers yet, but the question's been asked and they've been working on it.
Should we expect an answer to that by the next town hall meeting?
I think you should expect an answer, yes. Right now, I don't know when the next town hall meeting is, but if it's a month or so down the road, they've got a short time frame to get back with their answers, okay? That's the intent, to be able to answer those kind of questions.
Getting to the worst case scenario with Oxy 1, with the blue circle that you indicated that would go past the berm, the north berm, what are you going to wait until it happens before you come up with a plan of action, or do you have a plan of action now?
No, what the modeling provides for us is the identification of potential future problems, so the plans can be put in place now, so we're not playing catch up like we've been with the Oxy 3 event. That's where the modeling comes in. It effectively allows us to look into the future and say, here's what could happen, and like with the rerouting of Highway 70, which is everybody in here knows about, that's part of looking forward in case something happens, and then you take a look at all the other parameters like costs and everything. But our goal is to let the state and the parish and the local folks, particularly the local folks, understand what may happen so we can make appropriate response plans. Well, would you, go ahead. Would you back up on the slide? I'll take more questions, trust me. I need to tell you one thing. We put a microseismic array in Oxy 1. It was in Amendment 5 that we talked about last time I was out here. The microseismic array went into the Oxy 1 well. Oxy 1 well is a cavern well. And it turned out, because of gas noise, in the well that the array was not viable. It couldn't give us the sensitivity we demand to protect going forward for the long-term monitoring. So right now, once the 3D seismic is done, that array is being pulled from Oxy 1 because right now it's not providing us any additional information. We need to upgrade it. We have coverage through the service array that Dr. Pettit just mentioned. We've still got you covered, all right? We can hear things in 3, we can hear things in 1. We can hear things out away from the salt. We've got it covered from an alert level and everything. The microseismic array is designed to improve our accuracy. In other words, get better ears in the ground than we've got right now. And so we can observe seismic activity down to depths of 6,000 feet. So the array is coming out, and a new array is being designed right now, and we're fully engaged. By the time I talk to you next, I guarantee we will have that designed, and we will be able to give you a timeline when that new enhanced microseismic array is going to be online. So that's part of being honest with you. I wish it wasn't this way, I wish it was working, but the experts looked at it and it just, we can't make it work. So that's what's going on.
Is there a difference in the salt density of 3 and 1?
Not that we know of. Not that we know of.
It might just be me that doesn't understand what when you tell us that you have the technology, the instrumentation down to where you can let us know in months of what's going to happen with 3, with 1, I'm sorry. The information that you gather on 3, how far in advance, say like the last cave-in, the last sloughing off that happened, and the last burp, how much time in advance did you get the data from the time it was reported?
Okay, here's how these events occur. We usually will start seeing increased seismic activity about a week ahead of time. Okay? And what will happen, the micro-earthquakes, these are the real sharp things that indicate rock is breaking. What we'll see, they don't just go a few per day and then a whole bunch. What they do is they slowly increase over time. As events start increasing, Dr. Horton, Dr. Pettit are in contact with me saying, okay, seismic level is increasing, we need to watch it. At that point, we watch it literally every day, and Dr. Horton now is watching it multiple times per day, I can assure you, including 10 o'clock at night, he's watching. And what happens is they increase slowly, and once we get to somewhere about 50 micro-earthquakes per day, this has been the pattern, then we can expect a big burp. We can't tell you when, but it's usually within days, right? So it goes like this, and once we get about 50, we know we're in for a big burp event and everything else. So when those are happening, we know within a day or two that we're probably going to have an event, and that's when we get the workers out of there and everything else. We know it's coming, we just can't tell when. And that's what we've got right now. And we look at the entire array, the array's working fine, that's what's going on. The actual burp event, we've got minutes, but it's not seconds. Now, minutes count. For example, when they're doing the seismic survey on the sinkhole next week, they're actually going to have boats up there with what's called an air gun to put the energy in there. We are going to be out there, we're going to have all our computers watching real time, because we've got minutes of warning when one of the big burp events is starting, and that should be enough time for the airboats to get off the sinkhole and everybody be safe. So we've got minutes before a big burp actually hits the surface.
This is something you want to make the other answer. I've been here a long time. Is there any way to know, or do you have any idea how
Been collapsing?
active? When did, what mechanics, when did this start working? When it says the bubble started, is it
No.
possible it's been a couple of years? 3 years, 4 years, 5 years?
We haven't gone that far back to answer specifically with that, but with the modeling we've done and everything else, we know it was actively collapsing at least months before the bubbles ever started showing up, because it's big and it takes that long. We haven't gone back and done what's called a forensic analysis to try to better define that timeline, because to be honest with you, we're pretty busy handling day-to-day stuff going forward, make sure everybody's protected. But it was several months at least before anybody even saw bubbles.
Possibility of a couple of years.
I'll have to disagree with you there.
That's all right.
Here's the reason. I've been out there almost 6 years. I fished that area very regularly, down Bayou Corne, down in the Grand Bayou, all the way down to the Bayou and so forth. And I rode that. For a while there, I ran it every weekend during the week too, fishing. And right there where those pipelines cross, I have seen bubbles there for, I know, probably 4 years coming up right there with 2 spots. One here, one right down here, coming up. I mean, I would run right over them with my boat.
Bubbling there.
And that's 4 years ago.
At least 1999.
That's 10 years ago, I know for sure.
Longer than that.
So I disagree with you with that, nobody saw bubbles.
Okay. I understand, but also understand that up until late 2000s, the cavern was holding pressure and they ran sonars on it. Sonar where we can actually go down and look inside the cavern. And there was no evidence in the last sonar that there was structural failure.
That was back 2001.
The last sonar, I believe, was 2010. Just before they put in the application to P&A.
Really puzzles me where those bubbles go.
I'm hearing you.
I can guarantee you. That's all.
I don't doubt it.
How much is Cavern 3 filled up now?
Last time we talked, it's, in terms of volume, it's about 89%. Unfortunately, the well into Cavern 3 has collapsed at the bottom of the 7-inch casing. Texas Brine is moving in a rig to reopen that, but there's been a lot of seismic activity. You know, last time we met out here, the cavern had filled up 100 feet in 2 weeks. It's not going to surprise me at all if the cavern is mostly full now, because we've had a lot of seismic activity in the last 6 weeks. The last survey, it was 144 feet, and Mike, I think they're doing, are they doing a new survey once the 3D seismic's done?
They did the survey last week, we don't have results yet.
Okay.
A lot of it's going to be 140 to 160.
Okay.
How long is it gonna take to bleed that gas out of there?
Out of the aquifer? You're talking at least months. I can't give you any more definitive answer than that right now. As soon as I can, I will, but it's at least going to be months.
How long has it been in the aquifer? Can you tell that?
Well, it probably was in the aquifer before people started seeing bubbles, because it had to build up enough area where it actually started bubbling up in the bayou. And I understand you've seen bubbles out there for a lot longer. But
Is there any way to find the source? I know you showed that picture earlier, like one of the first few slides, of source of the gas. There's no way to drill into those sources and extract the gas?
no, that's actually one of the things, once we get to 3D seismic, we are looking exactly to answering that question. Okay, but we want to know where the gas beds are now, because that was 2007. That certainly is one of the questions, and the blue ribbon panel that the governor talked about today, that's going to be one of the things we look at.
So are you saying that you think it's still being fed, the aquifer is still being fed by gas from the ground, or?
All the data we've got, yes. It says it's still, and it has been since this thing started.
So is the 45 million cubic feet you're measuring really just a measurement of the reservoir, not of the
That's what's
Put it
in,
on the bowl that can hold the gas.
that's what's in the aquifer now, and you've got an unknown quantity coming in, and so it's what's out there now. As the venting progresses, and we've already seen this around some of the vent wells, it'll diminish, but overall, it's what's in the aquifer now, but there's still gas coming in through the disturbed rock zone.
And that's really why the 3D seismic combined with the modeling is really key, because the 3D seismic is going to map out those potential sources of the gas, and the modeling is going to be able to say how fractured the rock is. So we're going to be able to tie those things together and understand the potential pathways that the gas is taking off the surface.
The 3D seismic, when I understand that there are some locations that you're going to drill and put explosives in. How deep are you drilling and putting those explosives?
Don, the pen line went down 40 feet, the shot holes.
Actually went up down to two separate levels, or mini holes that went down to approximately 20 feet in the clay, and then the majority of the shot holes were drilled down to 40 feet.
So between 20 and 40 feet.
Right. I know that where I live, in the canal, there is a stake with ribbons on it, and so are we to assume that the location where we're going to put an explosive charge in?
I apologize, could you repeat that again?
In the canal near where I live, there is a stake with a ribbon on it. And we're trying to understand, is that a site where you plan to put an explosive charge in?
All of the charges have already been drilled. The only ones that are left to be drilled are on the western portion, I'm sorry, the eastern portion as I stand here on the Crosstex facility. That was the last permit to get. But all the other charges have been drilled.
All right, they've been drilled. Have the charges been exploded?
All of the vibrecise points have been vibrated. Those are the ones that are going to be going up and down Highway 70 and through the Bayou Corne subdivision. And they just started taking the detonated charges today. And they started on the far western side of the 3D.
So there would be no explosive charges in the inhabited areas?
No, of course not. Of course not. And the flags that you're referring to are either one or two things. Most of the flagging that you see are batteries and an input-output box, or where we collect the data.
In the water?
Yes, yes. If they're in the water, then there's something they call marsh phones. And they're the little spikes that we were talking about in the previous meetings, and they're placed into the substrate below the water. The ones that are on dry land are the spikes that you just see the little top, and it's an octagon about the size of my fingers right here, and they're placed into the ground about 2 inches. And there's usually about 6 of these phones in a circle around that battery and around that data box. So most of the flagging that you see are the recording devices.
Okay.
Dr. Hickox, thank you this last meeting, and just want to know, it's a concern to us about gas in the aquifer. The only big wells we're seeing is the one right around the neighborhood, which need to be there. But what about around the perimeter? What about over down? What about over Sugar Brown? What about over Crosstex? What about on the south side of the dome? What about further toward King Court? In your professional opinion, does these levels stop the gas? Does it stop right where you see the extent of the bubbling coming up? Or does it go further under less pressure?
To answer your question, the bubbles, and they're kind of confirmed with the shot holes that have been drilled. We've actually got data from the shot holes where they saw gas. And the perimeter I've shown you on previous slides appears to be where the gas pressure is high enough to push gas to the surface, okay? Which means that it probably extends around that at lower pressure, and the pressure isn't high enough to push it to the surface.
Why are we seeing gas? When are we going to see ventilators toward the outer perimeter? Right now, it's just right around there.
I know. Right now, Texas Brine is focusing around the community because That's primary concern. One of the Amendment 5 orders is they have to actually investigate the full extent of the gas and then design a remediation system for the full extent of the gas. That has not been done yet.
Leaving all this gas, burning this gas there, and vent valve and all that. What is this, all this gas that's burning off, what you do to the atmosphere and everything around the community, affecting the air that we breathe?
No, it's natural gas. It's like natural gas in your house, and when you burn it, essentially, the reason natural gas is such a clean energy source is essentially it burns 100%, so you get carbon dioxide and water. There's nothing else in there. We've collected, I don't know how many samples, like 99-point-something% of the gas coming out is methane, and when you burn it, you're going to get carbon dioxide and water. We sample every vent well. We've sampled bubble sites. We've been out sampling shot holes, so I can answer those kind of questions. We have to know what's coming out to make sure the flares are taken care of it. And right now, we're okay on that.
Before we wrap up, I just want to give a brief summary of some of the conversations that we had with the governor. Last week on Monday, myself, Vice President Henry Dupree, John Boudreaux, and our legislative delegation, Karen Saint-Germain and Rick Ward, met with the governor at the governor's mansion to discuss these issues. It was followed by a meeting on Wednesday with Texas Brine officials. The basis of these brief summary of the conversations and the discussions were threefold. The priorities of the governor were to talk about buyouts and compensation to give people the financial resources they can to move on with their lives. We expressed and advised the governor that we thought and we knew what the residents were wanting, what they needed to try to move past this event, and that culminated in the meeting on Wednesday with Texas Brine officials, many of which were here. Secondly, we discussed about the significance of Highway 70. We implored the governor that Highway 70 is a major thoroughfare for Assumption Parish and this region. Not only does it affect our parish, it affects the whole seafood industry and the whole region on the east side of the Chapel Line. It's a viable hurricane evacuation route. And lastly, we talked about the long-term process and his commitment to making sure he sees everything through and that the state is here for the long haul, and this Blue Ribbon Commission of experts that we told him we needed to be able to make adequate decisions regarding your safety, the safety of Highway 70, and the safety of the environment. Because obviously, as I told you all, and I told him personally, we as a parish do not have the significant amount of resources in terms of money or technical expertise to answer all of these questions. The governor, I can tell you, was very versed in the situation, had been advised about the situation, and we culminated in the meeting on Wednesday. When we met with Texas Brine official, he was pretty clear and pretty adamant with the group that he wanted to see some methodology or some efforts on their part to address your financial concerns regarding all the issues that you've been raising. He came today, he committed that to it, and he said he wanted to see something done, and obviously at that meeting, Texas Brine, along with their officials and CEO, was there and said they had committed to the process. But as the governor said, proof is in the pudding. You know, hope that the process goes forward, hopefully the process is fair and reasonable, and hopefully we see down the road, many of you feel that it's fair and reasonable, but we'll see. If nobody accepts the offer, then we'll see the proof is in the pudding is whether or not what takes place is what needs to take place. Secondly, they proposed a state-of-the-art GPS real-time monitoring system for Highway 70. Many of you throughout the days have been questioning whether or not it's safe to have Highway 70 opening, having the children in school buses traversing and coming to high school on Highway 70. We have been relying upon the DOTD experts, and they have been doing monitoring of that roadway since the event, but it's been manual. We have requested, and the governor has given full steam ahead to the highway department to install, it's probably over $1 million system through that stretch of the highway will give us hurrying on that roadway. We'll know immediately, and we'll be in a position with the state police and the sheriff's department personnel there to shut the road down. We told him it was critical that we have that kind of monitoring to ensure the safety of our residents and the safety of the traveling public coming back and forth through the Fairport, Bell River, and those regions. He committed that to us. As a matter of fact, they're moving forward on that. His point in time was that we told Texas Brian, basically, we're moving forward with it, whether you agree with it or not, and we're going to bill you for it anyway. And he stands ready with the Attorney General's office to see whatever he needs to have done to discuss those matters of financial reimbursement with Texas Brian. Lastly, he said he's committed to the long term, stick it out, and we told him, we knew it was costing the state a lot of resources with all of these experts that me and you are paying with our tax dollars. But he said he was committed to make sure we had these resources and these experts here with us till the end, and to have this committee formed to provide us the technical expertise and advice that we need to honestly evaluate the situation. All of these issues, I understand, John Boudreaux is an emergency management certified. I'm not a geologist, geophysicist, rock mechanics expert, or 3D seismic expert. We have nobody on the parish personnel that has that qualification. That's why we are relying on these individuals. We all will be relying upon the state's commission that they're going to appoint to advise us as to what the status of the problem is. As of right now, mandatory evacuation stays in place. As Dr. Hecox told you, it's a long-term process. We don't see anything happening right now that's going to alleviate or relieve the problem anytime in the immediate near future. So until we have answers from the 3D seismic, until we see some of the venting taking place that's having a positive effect or reversing of the effect of what's going on, until we have a full understanding of the stabilization of the sinkhole and Western Dome, that's where we stand, and we have no reason to lift it at this point. So that's where we're at. So that's just an update. The governor came today, briefly met with us, there was some Texas Brian officials, heard from Dr. Hecox and some of these other experts firsthand, heard from Mr. Boudreaux and our legislative delegation, as well as some of the residents that were there today. So that's a brief summary of what occurred with him. We are in it for the long haul. The parish plans on being there. John Boudreaux's there every day. Our staff is there every day. So that's what we plan on doing. I hope the reaching out of Texas Brian by their folks, I hope it's fair and reasonable, and hopefully a lot of these things can be resolved. If they can't, obviously many of you have representation and will have advice on that. So that's all we have to say at this time. We appreciate you coming. We plan on meetings in the future. You know, when we get the 3D seismic, hopefully we can have a better picture and more explanation as to really what's going on subsurface, and we can give you a better picture. In the meantime, that's where we are. If you have any questions, please contact the command center, and we'll go from there.
I have a question and a request. I think it's pretty clear to the people who want buyouts what procedure to follow. The people that might not want to take a buyout, might want to stay and be compensated for their diminished property value. I'm not sure if I'm the only one in the room, but I'm a little unclear as far as what procedure we should follow. So I was wondering if Mr. Brad Myers could meet with maybe myself and any other residents who, if you think you want to stay, maybe he could clarify that to us.
The question by Mr. Landry is that obviously it was pretty clear that the procedure or the methodology they would utilize for those that want a relocation or potential buyout. For those that want to stay, it's a little unclear whether or not, what claim forms, how do they proceed, who do they contact. And I think he was asking Mr. Myers whether he'd wait around a little while and maybe, I guess, on the side discuss that with those individuals that fall into that category as to what they may do or who they may contact, whether if they're not represented, who they contact. But we can ask Mr. Meyer, Mr. Shelfin-Shea, if they'd be willing just to hang around and I guess answer that question for those that fit into that category. Anything else?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to thank you, the sheriff, and all the gentlemen and the ladies over here for their participation. And Mr. Martin, I'd like to thank you. And Attorney Mr. Myers, I'd like to thank you, even though you wouldn't take my case.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate it.
We plan on being here for the long haul. Okay.